Good morning, everyone. My name is Mihir Jabalia. I'm with KPMG. I lead our technology practice in investment banking at KPMG. We're right here in Silicon Valley. And thank you for the opportunity to do this panel. I think this has been a terrific conference. It means something personally to me as a father of two teenage girls who want to get into STEM. I think this is what Mira and team do here is just fantastic in terms of getting folks involved in STEM. So we have a terrific panel here to talk about sort of trends in enterprise technology. So we'll just do a quick round of intros in terms of your background, what do you do, and then we'll get right into questions. So we'll spend probably about 25 minutes talking about kind of various trends in enterprise technology, and then we'll open it up for questions. Vikram?
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Mihir. It's a great day to be here, so thanks for coming out. I actually work at Salesforce, and that's the day job, and evening all by myself. So that's the day thing I do. Been working at Salesforce about 5 years. The main focus is actually the custodian of data in the infrastructure engineering, and that's what I do.
Great. I think it's on. Is it on? Yes. Okay, good. I'm Diane Marsh. I lead the engineering tools team at Netflix. I've been at Netflix for about 4.5 years, and what the engineering tools team does is we take ideas that our developers have from their desktop to their deployment in the cloud. As you might know, at least from this panel, if not from things you've read about Netflix, we don't have our own data center. We actually have all of our services deployed in Amazon, and we use that in a way that's quite interesting, and I hope we get into a little bit more detail about that.
And hello, I'm Jennifer Fraser. I actually run the data center engineering department at Twitter, and we do operate our own data center facilities as well as our points of peering globally. And so it's an interesting place to be when you inherit companies as you purchase them, or hire new employees who have worked in the cloud, and you're trying to merge all of your infrastructure into one contiguous operating space. So I hope we get to talk about that a little bit today.
Great. Thank you for the introductions. We'll go around and talk about sort of key trends in the enterprise, and then take sit there for questions with the panelists. So just first topic is sort of cloud migration. As I think a lot of you know, as you kind of look around, 93% of the Fortune sort of 5,000 companies are using cloud in some form or another. You look at sort of the latest sort of Gartner report that cloud spend will kind of reach $1 trillion by 2020, which is quite phenomenal in terms of the spend in the cloud. And you look at sort of the top three benefits, it's all about sort of scalability, high performance, and better access to technology. So given kind of our panel, I think first question would be for Vikram in terms of, as you kind of look at sort of at Salesforce, what are the major sort of concerns and pain points that customers face as they as they migrate to the cloud, and what is Salesforce doing to alleviate some of those threats?
Sure. Thank you, Mihir. Let's actually divide this into two broad categories. One is concern, which is something that keeps you up at night, and the other one is pain point. So for the concern, you can actually you're concerned, so you take a sleeping pill, and then you wake up fresh next day, but the concern is still there. The pain point is a little different thing. It's actually, now that you have started taking your sleeping pills, you've become an addict. So, there is no stopping to your pain point, because every day as your business grows, the pain points increase. So let's put some perspective around it. So the first concern that most of the customers, when they interact with us, is around trust. Can I trust you? Will you do, or what your API in that case says it'll do, will it do that? Or would it actually spring a surprise on me every time I go back to you? And given how security is on everybody's mind, it is trust and security. Is if I give you something, will you be a good custodian of it? Can I leave my kid at your childcare, and when I come back in the evening, I get back what I gave you? And that's a concern that most of our customers start with, which is trust. And that's why Salesforce, from the very day of its inception, had an external-facing website showing the entire health spectrum of entire enterprise computing world that we are in. Our entire infrastructure is visible to our customers. It's almost like having that paranoia webcam in your daycare center. It's you can look at us, what we are doing, and build trust. In the same way, there are many things that go in concern, but let's move over to the pain point just a little bit. And it's the very first pain point is around availability. I'm this dude, always submit my paper on the last day, on the night before the paper is due. Will you be up and running? Or will your server crash on me and my email, my docs will not be visible or accessible? That's what customers are saying. They're saying, I'm going to build my business, my entire value proposition on your platform. Will you be there when I need it most? And that's availability. The other one, which gets confused a little bit, is scalability and performance. Now, it's the same thing. If I'm thinking this way, that I'm going to do my paper in the last day, I think everybody in the class is doing the same thing. So they all jump in at 10 p.m. with their coffee mugs, and they're chugging away, doing their work, Google searches going on, and a lot of other stuff. And of course, there is a movie going on in the background that I don't want to miss. And there's music I'm listening to. It's all happening within my Wi-Fi in my house. Will it be able to keep up with all those multitasking demands that I'm doing? And that's what Salesforce as a platform provides you. There's this thing, you plug it in and you forget about it. You don't have to hire a capacity planning team that will actually tell you when you are reaching your peaks, when you are reaching your troughs, and how to manage them. So, there's the shameless plugin for Salesforce. We manage both your concerns and we alleviate all your pain points. And if you are into sleeping pills, then you are.
Great point, thank you. I've been around the technology industry for a long time, where when Mark Benioff was starting Salesforce, most people doubted, saying, most companies will never put their customer data in the cloud. And what a tremendous job in terms of, leading sort of a revolution. Diane, from kind of where you sit, I think Netflix has done a great job in terms of migrating billing into the cloud. Billing is such a sort of mission critical part of the business. But talk to us about kind of what kind of drove Netflix to moving into the cloud and also mobile, and also as you have gone through the journey, what are some of the biggest lessons you've learned?
Yeah, so billing was the last piece that was migrated. As you may guess, that's a complicated piece to migrate. We've gotten a lot of benefits out of being in the cloud. About a year and a half ago, you may remember that we went global, meaning that our service became available in every country in the world. And being able to scale up our services to be able to accommodate a global footprint was really one of the benefits of having a cloud effort, of having our deployment in the cloud. We didn't have to beef up our data centers. It means that we didn't have to really anticipate and guess what all of the utilization patterns would be in pre-purchase servers. It means that we get to piggyback on Amazon's infrastructure to be able to have our back if the demand far exceeds our expectations. And all of those are huge benefits for a company as we grow, and we've really realized all that benefit.
Jen, kind of from where you sit at Twitter, you've kind of operated your own data center facilities. So it'd be helpful to understand kind of how you evaluated that decision against moving to the cloud.
So I think a lot of the reasons that people built infrastructure that were originally cloud-based weren't necessarily the same as Twitter's use case or application. So although a lot of the services now that are streaming and providing that type of content are becoming more live, Twitter was always live. And so our actual points of peering and our connectivity around the globe required us to actually have our own services because other services that were available in the cloud didn't have the bandwidth or the capacity to actually serve the way Twitter's traffic moves. We're a different dynamic. We're not anticipating sales or people watching different shows. What we're actually doing is reacting to what's happening globally with no lead because we don't know when there's going to be an earthquake or a meteorological event that results in large outages. So going to the first statement about trust, it is about trust. And so we build these very robust, redundant, resilient systems to allow us to make sure that when Irma comes through and we lose part of our path to South America as we're moving transit for different types of data, we're still able to sustain that market. We're still able to provide. We keep really close contact with our partnerships and peers around the world that provide us those network connections as well as facilities that we serve out of.
That's great. One of the other big areas where there's a lot of spend going on and a lot of concern is the area around sort of cybersecurity. Just a sort of few quick facts. If you just every day, over 30,000 websites get hacked. Every day, there's over 600,000 Facebook accounts that get compromised. If you just look at the cybersecurity, cybercrime damage, it'll hit $6 trillion by 2021, which is not too far away. So it is a big problem within the enterprise. As you kind of, so for all the panelists who are up here, cybersecurity is a big issue, and I'll kick it off with Jen. As you kind of at Twitter, you face bots, you face all kinds of challenges. Talk to us about kind of what are the biggest cybersecurity challenges that you face at Twitter, and how do you guys kind of stay one step ahead of the bad guys?
So we have a phenomenal team that does all of that for us, and I can't give away all their secret sauce, but they're certainly in tune with the evolution of different targeting that we see, whether it's bots that are creating accounts and trying to change the trajectory of information, or if it's somebody who's actually trying to infiltrate information in some way, shape, or form. But what we really try and do is be thoughtful with the way that we evaluate the data so that we can make sure that the integrity is correct. So we constantly disable accounts that we have proven to be bots. We take that a step further and start removing URLs that are associated with bots from the past. We suspend accounts, and we start to make correlations and use a lot of machine learning to actually provide us that ability to kind of synthesize the data about accounts that don't seem real in order to allow us to kind of mitigate them and take them off the table and allow the actual voice of the users to be elevated naturally.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so I think that's all super important. And one of the things our team has done, in addition to some secret sauce things, is that we build tools, right? So our security team builds tools that they find useful, and then they share those tools with the rest of the community in the hopes that the internet as a whole can be more safe. And so you can find a lot of those tools online in the Netflix OSS website. And if those tools are useful for you, I hope that you'll use them and spread the word, because I think that it's all of our goal to make it a safer place.
Vikram, from your standpoint at Salesforce, I mean, you have companies which are putting sort of mission critical data onto Salesforce. And as you think about security being a big issue for a lot of the large enterprises, what are some of the biggest challenges that you guys face, and how are you guys staying ahead of the security issues?
Thanks, Mihir. Well, let's do the same. The broad classification makes things much easier to fit into the brain. So we look at this problem as process and people. Because at the start of every transaction, there is an endpoint which starts with person or a requirement around it. So how do we actually keep the entire pipeline secure is what is Salesforce numero uno go getting at it. How do we actually make people aware of the fact that phishing is still, password phishing in that terms, actually getting your credentials off of you is still, the lion's share of the start of the security threats that happen. So that's the people part of it. And the way we actually address it by having a very cool thing called as trailheads. These are very nice, tutorials that are very short, like 15 minutes max. And they talk about how to actually get ahead of your brain's inability to remember 1,500 passwords for, gazillion websites you go to. How to use single sign-on, how to use multi-factor authenticator that comes bundled in with when you, so it goes a little beyond, my website is HTTPS and it runs on TLS 1.2. How do you go ahead of that? So, and then when you go to the second broad category, that's where the machine comes into picture. That's where the data center security comes into picture. And there are different genres of security things that Salesforce does. But two that I want to call out most are, one is around metadata, which is actually your password. And one is around your data, which is actual what your organization thinks of. What's your PII? What's your personal identifiable information? What's your credit card number? Which we try to make sure is not even visible to us. So what happens is there is an end-to-end encryption that the platform provides. And of course, it has a name called Shield. You should look it up. It's a very cool feature that allows your end-to-end journey of encryption in a very seamless manner. If you open up the hood of one of those electric cars, all you see is nothing, and that's what we try to do as well. It's like you open it up, everything that happens in the data center, in spite of all the visibility we give you, it's there is encryption of data at rest, there is encryption of data in motion, there is everything. There is a bell and whistle around security. Salesforce want to be part of that.
One of the other areas which is getting a lot of attention is the whole area around data centers. So as you just take a step back and you look at kind of the amount of data that all of us are creating and all these devices are creating, the data is doubling every 9 months. It's pretty staggering to think about the amount of data that we are all generating and consuming. So if you think about the amount of data centers in the world, they're kind of growing at 21%. If you look at the amount of the operational cost of these data centers, 40% of it is energy. So energy, all of the companies that sit up here have big data centers. I'll ask Diane, kind of as you guys have been using AWS, and at the scale at which Netflix performs, kind of what are some of the benefits of using AWS, and also what are some of the challenges that you face in terms of your data centers?
Yeah, so when we talk about bringing something in-house, we really mean into AWS. So if I say in-house, that's what I mean. One of the interesting benefits of using AWS is auto-scaling. So it means, like I said earlier, it means we don't have to anticipate what the needs are going to be. We have a very, as you might guess, we have a very repeatable pattern around how people watch movies today in the U.S. at least. We have you get home from work and the people start turning on their televisions, and the use of our service goes up. They go to bed and they come down. And so, within the time zones that we have, there's a fairly repeatable pattern of usage. And that means that we can pre-scale and warm up some of those services so that there's not a delay in being able to provide the bandwidth that all of you need. We're also able to have Amazon's auto-scaling pick up the slack for us if we don't pre-scale enough, right? So it'll continue to spin up servers. And those are servers that we don't need to pay for when we're not using, but there's a benefit in using them in the trough, right? So the trough is when it dips down. And so what we've found is that there's a lot of things that we do while you're all asleep, like figuring out what movies you like to watch and making those nice recommendations for you. Some of those happen in real time, but some of those happen in a batch process. So we can start to spin up some of those batch processes at night and take advantage of some of that unused capacity. And so the Amazon's giving us this ability to kind of ebb and flow, not only with our users' needs, but also be able to fill in some of those gaps as we see fit for the business.
Jen, you guys are in a business which is always on. So as you think about Twitter, kind of how has the service level resiliency changed how you operate your data centers?
So it's interesting kind of talking about how a lot of companies exist in the cloud because we've been around for 11 years and we existed before the cloud was as readily available. We've actually had to rewire the entire data centers while we kept them live. So it's been an interesting and novel challenge to be able to change the wheels on the bus while you're driving down the road. And we had to do it on multiple layers. We had to do it on the service layer, moving our physical services off of a Ruby on Rails application, but also like the physical layer where we actually had to come in and say, hey, the original network bandwidth that we put in place just can't sustain. So actually rewiring the entire data center from a fiber optic standpoint to provision it. And then as we're kind of going forward and trying to optimize, because we talk about the cost of scaling, right now as we're seeing, threads go from 16 to 64 cores, that's a 4x density improvement. So there's optimization opportunities for taking old hardware offline and bringing new hardwares online, because the cost when we talk about the 40% that's being allocated to energy, what you're doing when you can actually densify is we're finding that the same server profile goes 4x from a threads profile and is able to compute just that much more densely. So it's making sure that your systems are resilient enough to take the ability and the applications of the hardware evolution to optimize the costs for your business. So it's a fun challenge and one that we're actively engaged in overcoming as our hardware teams continue to develop really closely with Intel and industry leaders to optimize around those hardware platforms.
Great, thank you. So one of the other areas which I think is getting a lot of interest is the whole area around AI and machine learning. And as you take a step back, there are a number of sort of technologies which have historically emanated from enterprise and then have moved to consumer. I think what's happening here is there are a number of platforms which are now being formed on consumer. Like you have Google, Amazon, Apple, and IBM, who are all trying to race into creating sort of AI platforms for the consumer. But I think we are in the very early days of using AI at large scale on the enterprise side. So it'd be great to kind of get the panel's perspective on what are the biggest areas where you see innovation in terms of AI and enterprise, and where do you see that going in the next few years? Go ahead, Jen, I'll kick it off with you.
So we obviously use AI and machine learning a lot, and our teams in Europe that we recently brought on from Magic Pony have done a phenomenal job to apply that directly to what our users actually see. AI is interesting because, again, a lot of the technology behind it was available, the algorithms, the concepts were available prior, but you're right, these GCS and AWS that are actually packaging it and making it as an available product for people to consume is going to increase the adoption of it. And so being able to leverage those from a industry and open standpoint to allow all of the businesses to accelerate and take opportunities and advantage of what the hardware is actually provided. It's interesting because I always kind of go back to the physics side, but a lot of these concepts in machine learning and AI actually are embedded in algorithms that were, evolved from the last 30 years, but the computation cycles that it took to actually process those were just so long. And now that we've sped all of this ability up, we're really able to capitalize and see it used across a much broader industry application.
So Vikram, you sit at a sort of unique point in the ecosystem where you have a number of sort of applications that you guys are creating. And so how do you see AI kind of creating new sort of applications for the enterprise?
Sure. Well, I just want to go back for a small thing that you said early on. It's about the enterprise computing and how its landscape has changed from starting mainframes to client client servers. I can't even say it right. It's almost looking like 10 years ago, but it's looking like history. Then moving into the cloud computing and, Salesforce coming to the foray of things. And now everybody crowding to get into this AI buzzword. So I see, in fact, enterprise computing taking the lead on it in a sense. And for the right reasons. If you look at Salesforce, which was your actual question was about, is that we have a platform, just like Watson, IBM has. It's called Einstein, very appropriate name. So what this platform does is it actually allows you to realize your dream. And the dream for the enterprise has been this. I sit on this pile of data that is structured, unstructured, semi-structured. You might call it JSON because it sounds cool, or YAML because, it's the new in word. But this is all data. It flows through the pipe, it reaches your house, and, sometimes it's audio and sometimes it's not. How do I make sense of all of this data? What is it? Of course, I know it's useful. That's why we have multi-billion-dollar companies doing data mining just for that. And such a strange word to say, data mining. It's like it tells you how hard it is that you have to mine it. And that's where the Salesforce plugin come in, which is Einstein's number one purpose is to make your data easily accessible to the algorithms that can then run machine learning on them, can give you some insights on your own data, can help you find trends that your bare eyes would not be able to find, or your iterative or reactive programming paradigms cannot find. Things that your Snow or Starflake schemas have missed out. It's that plugin that Einstein is trying to build. One of the greatest sub-tools within Einstein is Einstein Discovery, and I really loved it. When they said, and I was waiting for another one to come, Einstein Invention. That's when, they would take over the Salesforce proper. But right now it's Discovery, where it actually comes up and gives you what are your highest and most profitable leads and opportunities that you should go after. Stuff like that, changing the landscape of how we think and look at stuff. And enterprise companies are leading the way in transforming the perception around data. That is no more, a burden on you. It's actually active, and it's actually something that'll propel you to whatever you do in your business.
So all of you sit at a very interesting place in your organization where you see a lot of interesting technologies. Can you provide sort of one bold prediction for the next 12 months in terms of where you see enterprise computing going? We'll start with Jen. Maybe if you can provide sort of any insights into any sort of bold prediction that you think likely to happen in the next 12 months.
So I think what we're seeing is a continued distribution of production of information. So whether it's these, Netflix producing their own shows, now we have additional Snap coming in and to do the same thing, and you're starting to see this more diverse group of data that's being produced. And so how we decide to actually manage that data is going to be interesting, as well as how we're able to serve that data. So I think there's a really big opportunity around that, and I don't think anybody has quite, I think that YouTube's put themselves in a pretty good position to be able to serve a lot of that that's organic and small scale, but it'll be interesting to see the adoption and the evolution of how distributed productions are actually received by the global population.
I think that's a very valid point, and I think it's a big deal. I think another bold prediction is the chaos will be introduced into all of our lives in very distinct ways. And when we say chaos at Netflix, we really embrace a chaos automation platform where we're actually introducing failure into our systems to understand that resiliency and to make it better. And as we have 100 million users around the world, it's increasingly important that we are available for all of you when you want to watch a movie. You don't have that much free time, right? You want the service to be up when you're ready to watch it. And so we're doing crazy things because of our Chaos platform, like shifting traffic to different regions if there's an outage in a particular region. And I think you're going to see an increasing amount of awareness and focus on availability and clever solutions to solve availability problems like introducing chaos to figure out how best to approach that.
Wow, this one is a little hard one for me because I always think of prediction in the stock price, so it's not easy for me to predict. But what I do feel is that enterprise computing has been trying to go the cloud way and trying to centralize everything. Everything is federated. You know, there's one data center that serves the western side of the country, there's another one on the eastern side, and you know, nothing in between. What I feel is that in next 12 months, as data residency concerns increase, as we get more concerned about Equifaxes of the world, we would like to know a lot more about what is being done to our data. And that would force enterprise companies to actually be public about where data resides. It's the other way around. Because we try to be very, hush-hush about where your data is. But I think my prediction is that more people would ask, if you truly are taking away my social security number, tell me what are you doing with it?
So we've hit a lot of good points about enterprise technology and enterprise computing, but bringing it back full circle, I think there are a number of people in the audience who are women executives, students, CEOs of companies. What advice would you give to people in the audience who are participating, and kind of, as you kind of look back at your career, what advice would you have for people in the audience? Go ahead.
So actually, to what Vikram said, I do think that data is power, and I think that understanding how to utilize the data that you have that's for your business, and then also figuring out how to leverage data that's been either aggregated or available through other businesses or relevant business applications tangential to your business is going to be really important. I think that strategic kind of knowledge and understanding is something that's that people are going to have to embrace. And I think that it goes to Diane's point about chaos, because you're going to have to test it. And I think that that's actually a really fun place to be, that inflection point of testing your data against other data to see if there is opportunity or benefit, and then kind of recoiling back and figuring out, okay, what worked, what didn't work. But I think it's a really important thing to not be too risk adverse in that area, because I think there's no script for it depending on what your business is. There's nobody that you can copy or follow through this program. So I think people just have to go ahead and take those opportunities on small scales and limit their risk, but definitely start to take opportunities in order to find where their businesses can expand.
I think that one of the coolest things about the profession that we're all in, of computer science, is the opportunity to apply that domain to many different specific domains, right? So in my career, I've done applications in, automotive applications and genomics and ultrasound, and now to the point of working in entertainment. And you get to learn a little bit about every single one of those application areas, and immersing ourselves in each one of those application areas when we're in them make us a better employee, a better contributor in that area. But also being able to take that knowledge and then apply it to a different domain is also a great skill. And I think that when we talk to young people about why they might want to go into this field, explaining that this is a career that you can continue to evolve along with you, that you can learn a lot throughout your career and continue to evolve and change and apply in many different ways, is a way to really get them to understand the opportunity that this profession offers. And I think that that's one of the things we really need to talk to about for young people as we try to encourage them. We have a shortage of software engineers in this country. If we leave out a significant amount of the population, we aren't going to get there. We aren't going to solve the very real problems that we have today. So we're going to need to explain to people why they might like this field. And we don't, while I think it's great that people do all kinds of other professions as well, I hate to leave something on the table for people who would have been really great contributors in our field.
That's a great point.
Oh, wow. I think I already gave the advice. Don't get hooked on to the sleeping pills. I think when it comes to career, I think it's a great thing to see that more and more women are actually joining the STEM technology, science, and as Deanne pointed out, the software engineering as such is in so much demand for intelligent folks to come in and solve so many problems in so many verticals. And that's, I think, is where my career advice would go. It's like, don't be shy about, but I don't want to be just a programmer. But the thing is that you're not just a programmer, you're a domain expert of something that others don't have knowledge. You are now taking this knowledge into your domain and making it better, making it, more useful for mankind in general. So,
thank you. We'll open it up for questions. Any questions in the audience? Let's see. Can't see.
So hi, my name is Sanjeev. My question was that the new generation is growing on a different set of technology compared to what we, as in the current business world, deals with. And how does that impact? So Netflix is a good example where it's kind of very consumer focused and hence it works out. But Salesforce is another example of a company that actually solves business problems. And I know there are technologies being put in place for more collaboration to occur, but that's not how business used to be in the past. So what are the learnings that we are getting from the new generation of their sort of attention span that they have or the way they collaborate and communicate, and how does that impact how businesses will have to deal with that set of audience going forward?
I think one of the interesting challenges that I see, I have a high school age daughter, and I see that kids these days are increasingly comfortable with their information being out there everywhere, right? They're comfortable with a very public life in a way that I am not and was not. And I think that to some of the challenges that we talked about here around data privacy and security, some of the things we're going to have to face are making giving them an opportunity to be public where they want to be, but to be able to control that information themselves where they don't want to. And I think that's going to be a unique, interesting challenge.
So being at Twitter, fortunately, their attention span doesn't have to be that long, just 140 characters and we're good. But I think in general, actually, it's really interesting. I have a very diverse team, and we just had an intern class that was phenomenal that came through. And one of the things that they informed me about Snapchat is what we do isn't that important, so it can disappear. And so this idea of like this transient, it doesn't need to be recorded for the rest of time. It doesn't need to be, perfect, because it's just a memory, and it's a memory that I'm sharing with other people for a moment in time. And I think that's interesting because I don't think in the past we've had that type of perspective. I think of how when I was a child taking photographs, how precious each one of those photographs was, because the bulb would explode and then that was gone and it was recorded on the film and I only had so many snaps. And now we just take thousands of photos every couple of weeks without even thinking about it, because my dog is adorable. But really, their idea and interaction with data is just going to be more transient because they just don't think of it the same way we did. And the way our markets adapt to that, the way that we sustain their attention with entertainment and the variety of entertainment that they're looking for is going to be a challenge, but it's a really fun one.
One last question.
Yes, thank you. Paul Joyle. I'm from Washington, D.C., a company called NSI. Most of my life I've looked at Russian intelligence, and one of the questions I'm interested in discussing here in this conference is information warfare and the use of social media to manipulate political systems. Russia, since 2004, has meddled in roughly 20 countries around the world in elections. And so my question is to Twitter. I know that Facebook and other companies are looking, and Google are looking at artificial intelligence as a way to identify fake accounts and fake advertisements, etc., or non-legitimate, I should say. So I'm wondering what Twitter's approach is, and my other question is, do you see Einstein having a role here, and where do you think, let's say, the thinking is here on the left coast about these issues in Silicon Valley and all the rest? Where's the thinking? Because it's clear that California voted for a candidate that did not win the election.
Okay, I'll try and answer the first one about AI and try and stay away from the politics, although I'm probably closely aligned with most of the people in this country, or in this state. So I think that, pardon?
Makes two of us.
I did. Oh, yeah. So I think that from a AI standpoint, and we have a sophisticated algorithm that we use to try and identify this, regardless of politics or country origin. We are aware of it as an issue. We have seen applications used, and we keep all of that information confidential in order to best be able to continue fighting and working on it. It is an interesting conversation, though, because I know we have partners at other companies that we've worked with in the past or we continue to work with, and we do have to find a way of being able to share the information and strategies that we've deployed without giving away our secret sauce, because the risk in making the way that we kind of identify that information more public is that then people can kind of circumvent it. So it's a massive challenge, and from the perspective of having an invisible war, that you're fighting where somebody is trying to manipulate information and you don't know a lot about that person or what technology or strategy they're going to use. It's an ongoing thing, and this is definitely not my domain expertise at Twitter at all, but it is something that I am proud to see my company embrace and my peers take the gauntlet and really challenge this in a leadership position for technology. They're really going after this information and trying to do the right thing on every level and make sure that it is authentic and real, and that we don't have any type of manipulation coming across, regardless of whether it's political or if it's some kind of a country or whatever type of undermining that we're seeing being done through manipulation. It's something that we're trying to address.
Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in giving a big round of applause to all the panelists for sharing their insights.